sipping on a coffee while we're doing it.
Cool. Welcome back to the Cheap Heat Productions podcast. Okay, welcome back to the show. And today on the show, I've got a really special guest, all joining me all the way from America, Mr. Tom Fleming, who's former WWE graphic designer. How are you today, man?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Maurice.
Thanks for coming on, man. So, listen, I suppose like any boring generic podcast, we'd have to start at the beginning and how you got into art and all that kind of stuff. So, how did that happen?
Okay, I mean it was actually pretty simple. I graduated from art school, and I was actually flipping pizzas for like $5 an hour, just getting by, paying my rent. And I answered an ad in the New York Times. It was a generic ad, had no idea, who was placing the ad. I thought it was an advertising agency, and they asked me. I just put 6 snapshots of my artwork into an envelope, sent it in, and they called me back and asked me to come in for an interview. Had no idea where I was going. Thought it was going to be an advertising agency, and this was in Stamford, Connecticut, of course. Walked in and saw all the wrestling. As I was walking, all the wrestling posters and things like that. So I thought, it's probably an advertising agency that does the promotions and marketing for the WWF. And as they brought me in, I saw Tom Platz, one of the professional bodybuilders, walking by. And I was very familiar with Muscle and Fitness at the time and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, oh, man, there's Tom Platz just walked by. Maybe there's more to this than I think. And they told me when I started the interview that it was actually the WWF, and this was a transition period of them being in this building. They're building a huge building, right down the street where Titan Towers is right now. And we went on with the interview from there.
Were you a fan of wrestling before this? I know you touched on the bodybuilding aspect of it, but was pro wrestling something that you watched?
No, actually, I didn't know anything about wrestling at the time. As a matter of fact, the only thing I knew about wrestling when I went in for that interview was I knew who Andre the Giant was. I know who Superfly Snuka was, and the big ones, Sergeant Slaughter, Roddy Piper. Like the ones that actually were in the general public's eye. Otherwise, I knew nothing.
Do you think going into a job like that, it benefited you more from not being a fan?
100%. If I can honestly say that I was a massive fan of Marvel Comics and DC Comics when I started working for them, and it without a doubt changes your perspective. And whenever you're a real big fan of something, there's a natural tendency to be a little bit inhibited and a little bit more self-conscious about what you're doing. And when I started working for the WWF, there was no self-conscious at all. I was just kind of doing a job, whatever they told me to do. There was no preconceived ideas. I didn't even know who these guys were. So it was all very genuine and very organic, as opposed to, like, oh man, it's the Undertaker, he wasn't even huge then, but this shirt here, this was his first t-shirt. That was one of the first jobs I ever did for the WWF. And I'm really glad I didn't even know who the Undertaker was at the time, because it would have totally, jaded my, the project.
Yeah. And when you went in there to work, what kind of terms, what did you think that you were going in to do specifically? Because I know things changed over time.
Yeah, sure did. When I first started, they started me off on just strictly a freelance one project, and
Yeah.
that was doing the background to a Legion of Doom poster. And they didn't even say that they were hiring me. It was just to do that as a freelance job. It was they wanted me to do the background to that Legion of Doom merchandise poster as realistically as possible, so that they could Photoshop the photographs of Hawk and Animal on top of my painting, and it looks like they're in a kind of comic book alley kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that went really well. And they said, we would like to hire you for like 2 or 3 days in house, where you work in a cubicle. It's the office kind of thing. And if that goes well, we'll go from there. And then it did go well. Then they said, let's do a 2 to 3 week trial.
Hmm.
And the 2 to 3 week trial pretty much led to almost a decade of working for them.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was kind of like one of those things where um, when I started working there, when I got comfortable and really got familiar with my boss, she came to me and said, just to let you know, when you interviewed for this job, this is how she showed me a binder with just lit pages and pages of names and numbers of people she interviewed for the job. And she said, there was literally like 100 people that came in for the interviews. And I asked her, like, why me? And she
Hmm.
said two things. She said, you were young, you seemed like you were willing to learn and listen, and I could see how much talent you have. So that was a wonderful thing to hear, years later, after working there for a while.
Yeah. Do you think from, you were saying the Legion of Doom poster and then you had another project, do you think that they were maybe testing your creativity to see if you could be there long term back then?
For the Legion of Doom poster, I believe that at the time they had a guy who was doing a lot of their illustration work. His name is Joe Jusko, who's a big name in the comic book field. He was doing a lot of their painted work. He was actually an inspiration to me and is now my friend. So I believe that they hired me to do that because they saw that I worked in, I wouldn't say the same style, but there's a similarity, the way we worked. And I was young and I was willing to work way cheaper. So I think they were kind of testing the waters with, with my painting skills, and they needed the job done pretty quick. So uh, I think it was a combination of testing me out and the fact that this job had to get done, pretty quickly.
Yeah. And then in terms of costume design, I have like just a sample image here of Papa Shango.
Yeah.
And did you create that character's look from scratch? Was that all you, or what way did that work for you?
Okay, so they came to me. That was actually early on. That was one of the definitely the first, I think, 3 costumes that I designed.
Hmm.
Um, they came to me, told me that there was a wrestler named Charles Wright who was coming to the WWF. They said, we have a theme. It's the Haitian voodoo witch doctor. They said, go and watch the movie. Serpent in the Rainbow. And they said that'll give you a little bit of an idea of the page that we're on and what we want to see.
Yeah.
And so with the Papa Shango costume design, it was 100% from scratch. I just started kind of doing. Of course he's a witch doctor, so I wanted to go dark. And um, in the online, I know a lot of the actual original Papa Shango costume design. I released. It's on my Facebook page, and that was I did the full costume, and then my boss did the face paint which looked to me had no it wasn't imposing. It had more of a mime kind of look to it.
Yeah.
And I kind of took it upon myself to create and do a drawing on my own of what I envisioned the face paint to look like. And my boss presented that with the costume designs, and Vince just loved it. He immediately was like, okay, this is the costume, and that's the face paint. So yeah, it was pretty much my vision, but my buddy Jay, who I worked with, helped me actually build the costume. So once the costume was created on paper and approved, we had to actually put together and make the top hat, make his necklace of bones, his rain stick, all that kind of stuff we had to do by hand. And Jay was a huge part of that. And he actually collected animal bones from roadkill and things like that. And he brought in all these like authentic bones. He had fox bones and chicken bones and all kinds of, deer so everything on Papa Shango's original costume was real animal parts, which I don't know if that's a great thing to say or not, but back then it wasn't a huge thing. But yeah, it was all pretty authentic.
Yeah. In terms of the process then of you guys designing this costume, building it from scratch, before obviously it gets to the live arena and TV and whatnot, do you guys literally have to go to a room with Charles Wright, put the costume on, and then get the go ahead from TV people or whatever? What's that process like?
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly. So back in that day, what used to happen was they had these TV tapings that would air on, I think, Saturdays and Sundays.
Yeah.
And we would go to a location, and they would and it was, they would actually be like, okay, you're going to the taping for the debut of Papa Shango. And it was my responsibility. And if we worked as a team, then the team would go. But it got, Papa Shango was, mine and my boss's kind of creation. We worked together on that. Of course, she has to approve everything. And I had to appear at the location and make sure that everything was not only aesthetically looking good, but also functional. So, you don't want something to look great. He walks in the ring and, one of the, the necklace falls apart and the bones, all of a sudden you have a pile of bones in the middle of the ring and they're in the middle of taping the event. So you have to make sure that like whatever he was going to wrestle in had to be durable and, functional. And whatever he was going to walk into the ring for his appearance and take off just had to make sure that it made it that far. So, I was, and I have a whole story about Papa Shango's debut, and I was working on his cape. He had the rest of the costume on, and working on the cape, and I'm wiring rubber snakes and spiders and all kinds of like these textures and things like that on the cape. It's all laid out, and the Ultimate Warrior comes walking through, and instead of walking around, he literally walked through Papa Shango's cape on top of it, kicked it to the side, and walked and went into the bathroom. And I I could go into detail about that. That's that's when
why did he do that? It just seems like a fun story. So
it's there was a lot of ego, and he, from my experience, the only reason somebody would do that is because they have an arrogance and a disregard for other people. And it was, it was, and I was stressed out. It was one of my first costumes, and that happened. So yeah, that was a tough one. That was a tough one to handle, but
it could have been.
Yeah, everything actually went well. Papa Shango had a great debut, and the costume actually, it came together.
I think it's the classic case of a new guy coming in, and wrestling seems to be like that. A new guy coming in, it's his debut, and he might take my spot and things like that. It's a common thing in the business, I think.
Without a doubt. And, I mean, I'm sure that if you've heard the other podcasts, I've told the story about, creating Atom Bomb and the whole
Yes.
Mr. Perfect story.
Yeah.
That's a perfect example. That's the best example I've experienced personally of a young, strapping guy coming in and with the perceived idea that he's going to steal the thunder
Yeah.
based on the singlet cut.
Yeah.
They are very temperamental, some of them.
Yeah. In terms of, I always ask people about Vince, and everyone's stories that I've heard about Vince are great. Like, did you get to work hands-on with him much, and what did you find him? How did you find him?
Well, personally, the only time that I worked when I never worked actually one-on-one with Vince.
Yeah.
The process was in sitting in the art department in my cubicle. I got direction from my boss and the projects and the costume designs and things like that. I would do, all the designers would probably do maybe 3 to 5 different designs, each one of us. We would take our designs and have a presentation, go upstairs to Vince's office, and the elevator opens and you walk down the marble hallway, and you get to his big doors, and it's the penthouse, and it overlooks Stamford, Connecticut. You walk in and he has a big table set up, and you lay your costume designs across the table, and he just starts at one end of the table, walks down, looks at them, pretty much doesn't have any kind of reaction for the most part. And then he'll point at one of them and be like, I like this one. And then and if it was your costume design that that you created, then he would follow up with some questions about it and things like that. And there might be a couple of little tweaks here and there at sometimes. Sometimes he just liked it outright. And you just had that conversation. So it was pretty much me, my boss, and maybe in the beginning, one or two of the other designers. And then it got to the point where it was almost just me and my boss going up there. And we created, while I was there, me and her created all the new costumes pretty much that they needed.
Yeah. In 2002, then, is that the last piece of work you've done still for WWE at the moment, when you came back and done some stuff for Kane, and it was Team Angle, and of course, a piece of history as well, Mr. America, whoever he was.
Exactly. Yeah. So there was a gap of time where I was doing illustrations for them for the merchandise catalog. And then from about, let's see, I think it was around 98 or 99, somewhere around there, I had a lull. And then in 2002, I reconnected with the creative director,
Yeah.
and she said, "Hey, you know what? Are you interested in working on some new stuff?" And that's when they hired me to do, some of the biggest. I mean, Kane, Mr. America, and the Team Angle. Those were big. Those were three really big names, and it wasn't like one of those previous costume designs where nobody knew who Charles Wright. I mean, I shouldn't say that. The wrestling
Yeah, but
world,
not in a TV sense. Yeah.
exactly, not in a TV sense. So if you were a hardcore wrestling fan, you might know them, but it wasn't like they weren't a big name. They were coming to the WWF to make a big name. And this was the first time that I worked on wrestlers that were already established and big names, and they just needed revamps or a new concept. So yeah, that was the last. 2002 was the last time that I worked for them. Everybody, the my creative director left the company. All pretty much everyone that I worked with left the company, and new people came in. So I kind of didn't have that connection. But
Yeah.
at that time, I already moved on. In the mid 90s, I moved on and started doing stuff for Marvel and DC and the comic fantasy art, gaming, all that kind of stuff with Magic the Gathering and World of Warcraft. And so I moved on and actually never looked back. And that's why it's so wonderful now finding out that all this stuff that I did when I was like 26 years old had such an impact on a lot of people. And I had no idea for 30 years. what this meant to a lot of people. So I've been
Yeah.
getting some of the most wonderful messages that now that people know that I did it. I can't tell you how much I appreciate and how wonderful it is to hear from everybody.
Yeah. In terms of the Kane costumes, I think that was just about when he was going to lose the mask, but he was kind of losing. He had the two sleeves, then he had one sleeve, then he had no sleeve. So he was kind of transitioning that way. What
Yep.
was Kane Glenn Jacobs like to work with, or did you get to work with him much hands on?
That I did not work with him actually at all.
Yeah.
I never even met him because at the time in 2002, back in the 90s, I lived on Long Island and I would commute back and forth to Stamford, Connecticut and work in a house.
Hmm.
After I started working freelance, I moved to North Carolina. So when they hired me in 2002, I was living in North Carolina and wasn't hands on. I was working, through email and at the time
Yeah.
fax and that kind of stuff. So I did not get the chance to meet him.
Do you have any of the costumes that you made originals in your house, or do you know where any of them are?
Well, no, I actually, the only thing that I have one of Papa Shangos' skulls that I still, and I put it out every Halloween. I hang it outside and, it's at my front door I have a full skeleton that sits in a seat with the candy and stuff.
Yeah.
And that's part of my Halloween thing. I have one of Papa Shangos' top hats that was extra that I used. I have a pair of Atom Bomb's goggles and I believe that's probably about it. I don't
Yeah.
have I don't have a whole lot of stuff, but
I
that's
do
yeah.
I do see WWE. They have this new show. I seen it on YouTube a couple of weeks ago. It's where Triple H and whichever wrestler it was Ric Flair a couple of weeks ago, tries to track down these super fans for a robe that he wore at a particular WrestleMania or a particular event. And these things are worth like tens of thousands of dollars now. And I think WWE are planning on making a museum with all these things. Have you heard about that?
Yes, I have heard about that and it's pretty interesting. Uh I so I don't have the costume type stuff. I mean I have the ones that I just listed, but what I do have is I do have the artwork that I did, like the iconic the original paintings from the Survivor Series '93 with the turkey for
Yeah.
Thanksgiving. I have those. I have the original artwork to the first Undertaker T-shirt. I have artwork that I did. I don't have a lot of costume stuff though.
Still, Triple H might come knocking, and you better set a good price on those paintings for him.
Yeah, I hear you, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's been a long. I always wondered why there wasn't a brick and mortar Hall of Fame, and I think it's the museum and stuff. I think it's been a long time coming. That I spoke to my boss, the creative director that I worked with. I reconnected with her on Facebook,
Hmm.
and we actually had a little discussion about like God, there really should be a Hall of Fame and she was like I would love to. I'm interested in actually putting out the art of the WWF WWE and having a nice book of all the different costume designs and advertisements and all that. And I was like, that is a fantastic. I mean, I think the fans would eat that up.
Yeah, for sure.
It would be huge, and I don't understand why they haven't done that at this point, but that could be coming. And the Hall of Fame, I'm sure you've seen on the other podcasts that I've done talking about my buddy Jay, who I worked with, that passed away,
Yeah.
and one of his dying wishes was to for us to be uh, you know inducted as behind the scenes creators in the Hall of Fame. And I can't even tell you, how wonderful and fantastic that would be. If I got in, great. But if I could do that for Jay and his widow and Gina and family, to give him that respect and honor, that's up there on the to-do list.
Yeah.
While I'm here.
It's certainly something that can't be ruled out for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's, like, and I didn't even think we used to joke about it. I didn't even think it was
Mm,
possible until I realized, when people started telling me, the golden age of wrestling, and, I'd never realized how many costumes that I actually created. And some of the costumes I created, I was actually, I thought I was like, a little embarrassed about them. And then I hear that, no, when you're 7 years old and you watch these wrestlers coming out and stuff, the things that you might be looking at as an adult are these colorful, wonderful characters. And I had no idea that, a lot of them were really, it's all good.
yeah. I think there's a severe lack of that in the business at the moment from a character standpoint. I see a lot of guys, and there's great wrestlers, don't get me wrong. But I think, like, you see guys there in just black trunks. Now, it worked for Steve Austin, 1 in a million, black trunks. But I
Yep.
see everyone is kind of wearing the same ring gear, and it leaves them without, I think, an edge to their character. I don't know if you'd agree with that.
I do agree with that. It's, not that I'm, a huge wrestling fan right
Yeah,
now. And it's not like I really follow a whole lot, but the fact of the matter is that because of all this feedback that I'm getting about the 90s, and, and all there's a, there is a similarity between comic book superheroes and wrestlers. And, that's what identifies the superhero is their costume, their look. It's part of the personality. Sometimes it's even a logo, like, when you have, an iconic logo from a wrestler that,
yeah,
that identifies them. So yeah, I do agree that there probably could be some personality and a little bit more, and the thing is, a little cheesiness goes a long way, and or some personality.
yeah.
So yeah, the gimmicks are, they were successful for a reason.
Yeah. In terms of at the moment then and life after WWE, you've done some work with comics, you were saying with Marvel and things like that. Is there anything in the pipelines coming up that you can talk about and just how you ended up in that world and that WWE was kind of a stepping stone into where you wanted to be because of your love of comics?
Yeah, it's and that's well put. When I got the job at the WWE, I looked at it like it was a stepping stone to actually doing paperback covers and fantasy art. I had no idea I was going to be a comic book illustrator. My buddy Dave DeVries was a comic book illustrator that was doing work for Marvel and was doing a lot of work for DC. And I was a huge comic book fan, but never thought that I had I never thought that I had the style to work in comics. And then when all the WWF stuff started changing with all there was a lot of scandal going on
Hmm.
in the mid
Yeah.
'90s. That was when they started laying off a lot of freelancers, started reevaluating my future and things like that. And he offered to introduce me to one of the editors at DC Comics at a gallery show in Manhattan. And I took him up on that. And that interview, I thought was, don't call us, we'll call you. And 2 weeks later, they called me up to do the Superman trading card for the DC Masters trading card series. So and then I used that, showed it to Marvel, and then all of a sudden I was doing these comic book paintings for trading card sets. And to this day, I still do a lot of trading card art, and I'm working on some projects right now that are probably going to be released in the spring, and they're pretty big characters and a pretty big set. I just can't go into detail of
Hmm.
what it is, but yeah, the gaming stuff huge also. So I flip flop between fantasy and gaming with Magic the Gathering and World of Warcraft and um, all that kind of stuff. But I had no idea that out of all the stuff that I've ever done and where my heart and soul is, that the stuff that I did at the WWE was some of the biggest impact on pop culture and my career. And it's ironic, and that's the way life is. Uh,
Yeah.
you know, um, and I'm totally embracing it now, and just love all this feedback that I'm getting about the wrestling, about my past in the wrestling
Yeah.
world.
it's nice to get recognition even for something because you were so young at the time. But I do have a lot of people on here from, say, ring announcers, referees, different people from different aspects of the business. And the one thing I always say to them is once you put your foot in the wrestling door, you'll never get out of it, one way or the other.
And that is the truth, because I
Yeah.
thought I was out in the late 90s, and then 2002 they drew me back in. Now with the pandemic and stuff, that's where this all came about.
Yeah.
I
And the
was
internet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the internet, and the fact that I had to figure out ways to reconnect with a lot of fans and genres that I've worked in, because I couldn't go to comic conventions, and that income had to be compensated in some way. So I started reaching out to all the different genres and things that I've done, and I had no idea when I reached out to some of these Reddit and Facebook groups, the wrestling groups, how I had no idea that I was going to get the reception that I did. And it just became this, this whole thing of, oh my God, you're the guy who did this. And, you painted my childhood, and just the things that I feel about comics are what people are now giving back to me with
Yeah.
wrestling.
So you get it. I just want to talk to you, Tom, about your website and what people can expect to get on your website and what you're currently putting out there at the moment.
Yep. Okay, so the website is, it's either, I have a couple of different URLs that actually get you to the website. One is
Mhm.
Fleming Art,
Yeah,
and TomFlemingArtwork.com. So
yeah,
TomFlemingArtwork.com is probably the easiest.
yeah,
And I have a whole page. So when all this started, I had a small little tiny section of WWE, WWF stuff, and never realized how much interest that people have. So now I have a whole section dedicated to WWE, WWF artwork. In the original art section, there's sketches and paintings and things like that listed. A lot of those don't have prices on them, because I like to talk,
yeah.
I want people to contact me and talk to them, because there's historic value to a lot of the artwork. And to be honest, I don't know exactly how to price a lot of it yet. But I do sell prints and signed prints, and I do a embossed logo now on all the prints, so that it is, that if you buy one from me, it is directly from the creator.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so it's, if anybody has any questions, I post a lot of stuff on Instagram and Facebook, but the website has almost everything that I share on the Facebook groups and Reddit groups. I then put on my merchandise page on the website.
I think you should hold on to some of those original prints because I think Triple H could end up knocking on your door soon looking for them.
Yeah, there's a few. I mean, the Survivor Series and the Royal Rumble. I don't have the
Sure.
original Royal Rumble '94 painting.
That's the
Yep,
Survivor Series Thanksgiving there. Yeah.
I do have the original painting for that, and then I have
Yeah.
the single Undertaker that I painted that was superimposed on top of Tatanka when Tatanka got hurt for the
Yeah.
video cover. And then I have the the original artwork for the Royal Rumble T-shirt merchandise. It's a pen and ink drawing for Royal Rumble '94, when they're all coming out of the TV.
Yeah.
This one
Oh, yeah.
is,
Yeah.
yeah, they're coming out of, I think, the Indianapolis Convention Center or something like that, out of the roof.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tom, it was an absolute pleasure to catch up with you today, and maybe we'll do this again in the spring when you have some more things to talk about, maybe on the pipelines.
Yeah, the wrestling stuff, without a doubt, just let me know. There's a million other stories and little things that I could talk about, and reconnecting with Brian Clark and doing new artwork for Adam Bomb.
Yes, I
And
had Brian on as well at the show a couple of months ago. Lovely guy.
yeah, he really is great guy.
Yeah,
It was great to reconnect with him, and I'm sure at some point we're going to do a show or two together with
brilliant.
the Atom Bomb stuff, which will be fun. I'll have, I would love to do more wrestling stuff. So anybody, if I've gotten request. But if the WWF wants to, WWE wants to put some new personality into the costumes, I'm open to that. To start working for them again. So yeah,
I'd love to see it.
Yeah,
Thanks a million, Tom.
Oh, my pleasure, man. Have a happy holiday, all the
You too.
holidays and stuff, Christmas, New Year's, all that stuff. And yeah, I'll talk to you in the new year.